You know when you're enjoying a really great beer and you think, wow, someone actually made this?
Yeah, it's kind of amazing sometimes.
Well, today, we're thinking that someone could actually be you. We're doing a deep dive into homebrewing beer.
So it's fun.
We got a whole stack of resources from you, our listeners, everything from beginner guides to like really intense forum debates.
Right, the passionate brewers online.
Exactly. So our mission basically is to give you a solid handle on what it actually takes to brew your own beer at home.
Whether you're just curious or maybe thinking about, actually doing it.
Yeah. Are you picturing that basement brewery setup? We're going to cover the process, the gear you need, what it might cost, and that big question. How does homemade stack up against craft brewery beer?
Okay, let's dive in. It's interesting just seeing the range you mentioned. Kits for beginners, people dissecting hop oils.
Right. It really shows it's not just one thing. You can keep it simple or go super complex.
Totally scalable hobby.
Yeah.
But it all starts with those basic ingredients, right? Turning them into beer.
Okay, so step one is making the wort. Is that right?
That's it. Wort. W-O-R-T. It's basically the sweet, liquid, unfermented beer.
And that sweetness comes from malt, usually barley.
Usually barley, yeah. Though wheat, rye, oats, they all show up in different recipes. The key is its malted grain.
What does malted actually mean in this context?
Good question. It means the grain has been steeped in water, allowed to germinate slightly, and then dried. That process develops the enzymes needed to convert the grain starches into sugars during brewing.
Ah, okay. So how do we get those sugars out?
That's called mashing. If you're doing all grain brewing, which gives you the most control, you, the brewer, steep the crushed malted grains in hot water. Think of it like making a giant batch of porridge or tea at a very specific temperature.
Okay.
Those enzymes get activated and chop up the starches into sugars. But there's an easier way for beginners called extract brewing.
Extract brewing.
Yeah, someone else has already done the mashing for you. You buy a concentrated syrup or powder malt extract and basically just dilute it. Skips a whole step.
Gotcha. So mash yourself for control, use extract for simplicity. Either way, you end up with this sugary wort. What's next? The boil.
Yep, the boil. You get that wort boiling, usually for about 60 minutes, sometimes 90.
Yeah.
And this isn't just about heating it up.
Right. This is where the hops come in. I saw that mentioned a lot.
Exactly. Hops are crucial. They add bitterness to balance the sweetness of the malt, plus all those amazing flavors and aromas, citrusy, piney, floral, spicy.
And when you add them, it makes a big difference.
Huge difference. Add hops right at the beginning of the boil, you get mostly bitterness. Their alpha acids need time and heat to isomerize, which is what makes them bitter.
Okay, so bittering hops go in early?
Right. Then, if you add hops later, say in the last 15 or 20 minutes, you preserve more of their volatile oils, which contribute flavor.
Makes sense.
And for aroma, you add them right at the end, maybe even after you turn off the heat. That's called a flame-out addition or sometimes whirlpooling. That captures the most delicate aromatics.
So you could use the same hop type at different times for different effects.
Absolutely. A classic example is Cascade. Used early, it gives a clean bitterness. Used late, it gives that signature grapefruit aroma.
Cool. And it's not just hops, right? People throw other stuff in the boil.
Oh yeah, spices like coriander or orange peel for Belgian whip beers, different sugars like Belgian candy, sugar for triples or doubles, even fruit sometimes. It's a real creative point in the process.
Sounds like fun. Okay, so boiling's done, hops are in, now what? Just let it cool down.
You need to cool it down, and you need to do it fast. This is really important.
Why fast?
Couple of reasons. First, you want to get it down to the right temperature for your yeast quickly. Too hot, you'll kill the yeast. Also, chilling it fast helps lock in those hop flavors and aromas you just added.
Ah, okay.
Plus, it helps something called cold break happen, where proteins and tannins clump together and fall out of suspension, leading to clearer beer later. And it reduces the time bacteria might have a chance to get established, though that's less of a risk with boiling hot wort.
Right. So how do homebrewers cool it quickly? Just stick the pot in an ice bath.
That's definitely one way. The simplest method. Sink full of ice water. Works okay for smaller batches, but for bigger batches, it can take a while.
So what else?
More efficient options are wort chillers. An immersion chiller is common. It's basically a coil of copper or stainless steel tubing. You submerge in the hot wort and run cold water through it.
Okay, I've seen pictures of those.
And then there are counterflow chillers or plate chillers where the hot wort flows one way and cold water flows the other, separated by metal. Very fast, very efficient.
That's a bit more advanced.
A little, yeah. And then there's the no-chill method, popular in some places like Australia. You just transfer the boiling wort directly into a sanitized, heat-proof container, seal it up, and let it cool naturally overnight.
Huh. Does that work okay?
It can, yeah.
Yeah.
Saves water, saves time on brew day. Might affect hop character a bit, especially aroma, but lots of people have great results. Main thing is get it cooled down one way or another.
Okay, so wort is made, boiled, hopped, and cooled. Now for the magic part. Yeast.
Exactly. Fermentation. This is where that sugary wort actually becomes beer. You add the yeast, brewers call it pitching the yeast.
Pitching. Got it.
These little yeast cells wake up in that sugary environment and just go to town. They eat the sugars,
And produce.
alcohol and carbon dioxide, the two key products we want.
Right. Where does this happen? In the boil kettle.
No. You transfer the cooled wort into a sanitized fermentation vessel, usually a big food-grade plastic bucket or a glass or plastic carboy like a giant jug.
And it needs to be sealed.
Sealed, but not completely airtight initially. You need to let that CO2 escape, otherwise pressure builds up. So you fit an airlock to the lid.
That little bubbly thing.
That's the one. It's a simple valve, often S-shaped or a three-piece design, that you fill with a bit of sanitizer or water. CO2 bubbles out, but air, and more importantly, bacteria and wild yeast, can't get in.
Clever. How long does this take?
Primary fermentation, the really active part, usually takes maybe a week or two, depending on the yeast temperature and the beer itself. You'll see lots of bubbling in the airlock at first, then it slows down.
I saw mentions of secondary fermentation. Is that always needed?
Not always, no. It used to be standard practice. You transfer the beer off the yeast sediment into a second carboy to let it clear and condition further.
But now?
Many brewers skip it, especially for ales that ferment relatively quickly. It reduces the risk of oxidation or infection from transferring. But for lagers, or beers you want to age for a while or add fruit to, secondary can still be useful. Some modern fermenters, unit tanks, are designed for both primary and secondary in one vessel.
And temperature matters here too, right? Ales versus lagers.
Oh, hugely.
Yep.
Ale yeasts like it warmer, typically room temperature, maybe 65, 72 Fahrenheit, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
They work faster and often produce fruity esters or spicy phenols as byproducts.
Okay.
Lager yeasts need it much cooler, think 45, 55 Fahrenheit. They work slower and produce a much cleaner, crisper beer, letting the malt and hop character shine through more. Controlling fermentation temperature is probably one of the biggest things you can do to improve your beer quality.
Right, so keeping it consistent. Okay, yeast do its job. We have flat beer. How do we get the fizz?
Carbonation time. Two main ways for homebrewers: bottling or kegging.
Bottling seems like the classic way.
It is. It's how most people start. You mix a carefully measured amount of priming sugar, usually corn sugar, dextrose, into the finished fermented beer. Then you fill your sanitized bottles, cap them, and let them sit at room temperature for a couple of weeks.
And the sugar.
The small amount of yeast still in the beer consumes that priming sugar, creating just enough CO2 inside the sealed bottle to carbonate the beer. It's like a mini fermentation at each bottle.
Okay. What about kegging?
Kegging is, well, a bit more of an investment up front, but many brewers prefer it. You transfer the beer into a Cornelius keg, often called a corny keg, seal it, and then force carbonate it by hooking up a CO2 tank and regulator.
So you inject the CO2 directly.
Exactly. You can set the pressure precisely to get the carbonation level you want, and it's usually much faster than bottle conditioning. Plus, serving from a keg with a tap is pretty convenient. No bottles to clean.
I could see the appeal. Okay, that covers the whole process. Wow. Let's talk gear. What does a beginner actually need to get started? I saw that SoCo kit list and the videos.
Yeah, starter kits are definitely the way to go initially. They bundle the basics. For the actual brewing part, the hot side, you absolutely need a boil kettle. At least 5 gallons. Bigger is often better to avoid messy boilovers.
Just a big pot, basically.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
Stainless steel or enamel-coated is good. Then, if you're doing extract with steeping grains, you'll need a mesh bag, like a muslin bag, to hold those grains while they steep. A long spoon or paddle for stirring. Very important. And then that wort chiller we talked about, an immersion chiller, is probably the most common starter upgrade from just an ice bath. Though again, no chill is an option.
Right. Hot side done. What about for fermentation, the cold side?
You need a primary fermenter. That 6 or 6.5 gallon food grade bucket or a carboy. You need more space than your final beer volume because of the foam, the krausen, during fermentation.
Okay, bucket or carboy? Lid.
Definitely a lid, yeah. It needs to be tight-fitting, and it needs a hole, usually with a rubber grommet, to fit the airlock, or a stopper for the carboy neck.
And the airlock itself.
And the airlock, yes. Essential little piece. Some people also use what's called a blow-off tube at first, especially for really vigorous fermentations. It's just a piece of tubing running from the fermenter lid into a bucket of sanitizer. Gives more room for krausen to escape without clogging the airlock.
Good tip. Secondary fermenter optional, you said?
Optional, yeah. Nice to have later maybe, but not essential to start.
Okay, beer's fermented. Time for bottling gear.
Right. You'll want a bottling bucket, another bucket, but
Yeah.
this one has a spigot near the bottom. Makes filling bottles way easier.
Gravity feed.
Exactly. You need some tubing to attach to the spigot and a bottle filler on the end of the tube. It's got a little spring-loaded tip. Press it to the bottom of the bottle. It fills. Lift it. It stops. Minimizes splashing and oxidation.
Handy.
You'll need bottles, obviously. Standard 12 ounces or 22-ounce brown glass bottles are best. Brown protects against light damage, skunking. You make sure there's the pry-off kind, not twist-offs.
Why not twist-offs?
The cappers don't seal them properly. Which brings us to the bottle capper. Usually a handheld wing capper or a bench capper. And, of course, new sanitized bottle caps.
Okay, that seems like a complete set for bottling. Anything else we're forgetting?
Oh, the most important thing. Cleaning and sanitation supplies.
Yes, the non-glamorous but critical part.
Absolutely critical. You need a good cleaner to remove grime and residue, and then a reliable sanitizer. Starsan is super popular. It's an acid-based, no-rinse sanitizer. Follow the dilution instructions carefully.
No rinse is nice.
Definitely. There are other options like iodophor or even properly diluted bleach, but bleach needs very thorough rinsing. You'll also need brushes. A bottle brush is a must, maybe a carboy brush too. Everything that touches the beer after the boil has to be spotless and then sanitized. No shortcuts.
Got it. Okay, and maybe a couple of measuring tools.
Yeah, good point. A thermometer is essential for hitting your mash temperatures, if all grain, and pitching temperature correctly. And a hydrometer, that's the tool that measures the density or specific gravity of your wort in beer.
Why measure density?
By measuring the gravity before fermentation, original gravity or OG, and after fermentation, final gravity or FG, you can calculate the alcohol by volume, ABV. It also tells you if fermentation is complete. Really useful tool.
Okay, that's quite a list. So
Yeah.
the big question, cost. What are we talking about to get set up?
It varies, naturally. Those starter equipment kits, the ones with the bucket, carboy, airlock capper, basic stuff. You can probably find decent ones for maybe around the $100 to $150, sometimes a bit more depending on what's included.
Okay, that's the initial gear.
Right. Then you need ingredients. Recipe kits are easiest to start with. They have the malt extract, specialty grains, hops, yeast, priming sugar, everything pre-measured for a 5-gallon batch. Those might run anywhere from, say, $30 to $60 or more, depending on the beer style. An IPA with lots of hops will cost more than a simple pale ale.
30 to 60 bucks for 5 gallons of beer. That's about 50 bottles.
Roughly, yeah. Around 2 cases. So per bottle, it's already looking cheaper than buying craft beer.
Definitely. What about if you buy ingredients separately?
If you go all grain or design your own recipes, you buy malt by the pound, hops by the ounce, yeast packets. Costs vary, but you often save a bit more per batch that way, especially if you buy in bulk. And don't forget consumables like sanitizer and caps, but those are pretty inexpensive per batch.
And then there's the rabbit hole of upgrades, right?
Oh yeah, that's where it can get expensive if you let it. Moving to all grain requires more gear, a mash tun, maybe a bigger kettle, perhaps a pump, kegging systems, the kegs, CO2 tank, regulator fridge, or keezer for serving. That's a few $100s typically. Fermentation temperature control. You can really keep going.
So you can start reasonably, but the sky's the limit.
Pretty much. But the basic setup gets you making good beer.
Okay, which leads us perfectly into that comparison we mentioned. Homebrew versus craft brewery beer. That Reddit discussion had some strong opinions. Can homebrew really be as good?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the consensus from that thread, and generally in the community, is...
Yes, absolutely. It is possible to make truly excellent, even outstanding beer at home that can rival commercial craft beer.
But there's always a but, right? What are the challenges?
The biggest challenge mentioned is often consistency and repeatability. Breweries have incredibly precise process control, sophisticated lab equipment, and they brew the same beer over and over, tweaking constantly. It's harder to achieve that same batch-to-batch consistency at home. Makes sense. What about ingredients? Someone mentioned hops.
Yeah, that was a point. Big breweries can contract for specific, lots of hops directly from farms, selecting for the exact aroma profile they want. Homebrewers usually buy from whatever lots the homebrew shop gets, which are still high quality, but maybe not that hand-selected batch. Though, like that UK commenter said, sometimes homebrewers can access the same suppliers.
So ingredient access might be a slight variable. And equipment.
Definitely a difference there. Commercial breweries have advanced gear-dissolved oxygen meters, yeast propagation labs, centrifuges for clarification, high-tech bottling or canning lines with quality checks. Things most homebrewers just don't have access to. Precise temperature control throughout the entire process is also easier on a commercial scale.
Scale itself is a factor too, I guess.
Huge factor. The resources and specialized knowledge available to a pro brewery are just different.
So, with all those advantages for the pros, why bother homebrewing if the goal is top-tier beer?
Well, a few reasons came through loud and clear. One, control and customization. You can brew exactly the beer you want. Tweak the hops, the malt, the yeast. Make something unique that no brewery offers.
Your own perfect beer.
Exactly. Two, cost savings. Once you have the gear, brewing your own is significantly cheaper than buying craft six-packs or pints.
Yeah, we saw that with the ingredient costs.
And three, the hobby itself. Many people just love the process, the learning, the experimentation, the satisfaction of making it yourself. It's not always about perfectly cloning a commercial beer. It's about the craft and the enjoyment.
Plus, you can enter competitions, get feedback.
Right. Get objective feedback, maybe win a medal. It's a whole community. So while matching pro consistency is tough, achieving pro quality is definitely within reach for dedicated homebrewers.
Okay, let's circle back hard on sanitation for a second because it came up so many times as being non-negotiable. That BYO article was intense about it.
It really is the golden rule. Clean first, then sanitize everything that touches the wort or beer after the boil. Your fermenter, lid, airlock, any hoses or tubing, your siphon, bottling bucket, bottle filler, every single bottling cap, everything.
And using the sanitizer correctly.
Follow the instructions, correct dilution, correct contact time. And with no-rinse sanitizers like Starsan, trust the no-rinse part. That foam is okay. Rinsing it off just risks recontaminating with tap water.
Where do people usually mess up?
Sometimes it's things like scratch plastic buckets. Those scratches can harbor bacteria. Valves and hoses can be tricky to clean thoroughly. Forgetting to sanitize small things like the airlock or your thermometer before taking a sample, you just have to be meticulous.
But if you do mess up, it's usually just bad tasting beer, not dangerous, right?
Generally, yes. Beer is actually a pretty harsh environment for dangerous pathogens. Low pH, alcohol, hops. They don't tend to like it. So poor sanitation usually leads to off flavors, sourness, weird funkiness, but it's very unlikely to make you seriously ill. Still ruins your beer, though.
Definitely want to avoid that. Okay, quickly then, what are some of those common problems or off flavors a new brewer might run into? The BYO piece mentioned a few.
Sure. Sometimes you might get harsh flavors.
You can?
Could be water chemistry. It could be pulling tannins from the grains if you sparge too hot or with the wrong pH in all grain. Maybe too many bittering hops.
Okay.
Carbonation issues are common when bottling takes too long or it's uneven. Kegging gives more control there. Stuck fermentation is another. The yeast quits before finishing the job, leaving the beer too sweet.
What causes that?
Could be temperature swings, not pitching enough healthy yeast, maybe the wort didn't have enough nutrients or just too many unfermentable sugars in the recipe.
And specific off flavors, like buttery popcorn.
Ah, diacetyl. Yeah, that's a common one. Often related to yeast health or fermentation temperature. You might also get phenolic flavors like clove, smoky, or even plasticky medicinal, sometimes from wild yeast or chlorine in the water. Or acetic acid, which is basically vinegar, usually a sign of bacterial contamination and oxidation.
Okay, so lots to learn, potentially some troubleshooting.
It's definitely a learning process,
Yeah.
but that's part of the fun, figuring things out, improving your process, making better beer each time.
Absolutely. So wrapping this up, it seems like homebrewing is this really engaging blend of science and art. It takes some attention to detail, especially with sanitation.
Crucial.
Understanding your ingredients, getting the basic gear, and following the steps. You can start simple with kits or extracts, or go deep with all grain.
And while hitting that perfect commercial consistency every single time is a high bar, the potential to make fantastic beer, save money, and just enjoy the craft is absolutely there.
Well, hopefully for you listening, this deep dive has demystified homebrewing a bit. You've got the basics of the process, the gear, the costs, and how it fits into the wider world of beer. You've got that foundation now.
So maybe the provocative thought to leave you with is this. What kind of beer would you be most excited to try and brew yourself? Maybe check out a local homebrew shop website, browse some recipe kits online, or lurk in a homebrewing forum. Your next favorite pint might just be one you haven't even brewed yet.